My name is Laura Bennett, and on the morning of February 14th, 2025, I learned that a person can die twice in the same hour. The first death certificate was printed on crisp letterhead from St. Mary's Oncology Center, stage 4 ovarian cancer, metastases in the liver, lungs, and bones. Aggressive presentation. The oncologist's voice had been gentle, but the words still sounded like gunshots in the small beige room. Median survival, 9-14 months with aggressive treatment, less without it. I sat there clutching the folder they gave me, the one with the pastel cover that said, "Your journey begins here," as if cancer were a carnival cruise. My fingers were so cold the paper started to feel wet. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I still had to pick up Mark's dry cleaning before 5. Mark, my husband of 29 years. The man who once carried me over the threshold of the little blue house on Maplewood Lane and promised he would never let me fall. He let me fall. The second death certificate came 43 minutes later, delivered by text message while I was still sitting in the hospital parking garage, engine off, staring at nothing. Mark, I'm sorry, Laura, I can't do this anymore. The cancer, the bills, all of it. I took what we needed to start over. Jessica understands. Please don't fight me on this. I left the Honda. The house is yours. I'm already gone. Attached was a photo of him and his 26-year-old secretary on a beach in Aruba, tanned and laughing, holding margaritas the color of antifreeze. The timestamp was 4:12 a.m. that morning. He'd been packing while I was vomiting from the biopsy prep. I stared at the screen until it went black. Then I opened our joint checking account on my phone. Balance, $11.47. Savings, $0. The equity line we'd paid down for. 15 years, maxed out, $12,000 withdrawn yesterday. My retirement account, emptied. Even the Christmas Club account we used for the grandkids, gone. 29 years of double shifts as an ICU nurse, every overtime hour, every skipped vacation, every time. I told myself, next year we'll travel. All of it vanished with a few clicks while I was being told I was dying. I don't know how long I sat there. The windows fogged with my breathing. I remember the cold seeping through my thin coat, the kind of cold that starts in the bones and works its way out. I remember thinking, I have no money, no health insurance now, that Cobra will cost $400 a month. Don't have, and a cancer that grows faster than lies. I should have cried. Instead, I felt something harden inside me, the way concrete sets. A strange metallic calm. I opened the glove box to find tissues and saw the wig box instead. The one I'd bought last week when my hair started falling out in clumps. Human hair, honey blonde, $2,800 I'd put on the credit card for when it gets bad. I hadn't even tried it on yet. The box was still sealed with the little gold sticker from the specialty shop in Chicago. I laughed then. A horrible barking sound that echoed inside the car. I was holding $2,000 worth of someone else's hair while my husband drank margaritas in Aruba with the rest of my life. That's when I noticed the crying outside. Not soft crying. The kind that comes from the bottom of the soul, raw and ugly and unstoppable. In the next row of the parking garage, a young woman, maybe 25, sat on the concrete curb between two cars. Knees drawn up, face buried in her arms. She wore a thin white sundress, completely wrong for February in Illinois, and a denim jacket that had seen better days. Her head was completely bald, the skin shiny and vulnerable under the fluorescent lights. Every sob shook her whole body. I don't know why I got out of the car. My legs moved before my brain caught up. Maybe because I recognized the sound. I'd made it myself in the bathroom mirror. 2 nights ago when the first handful of hair came out in the shower. I walked over, my boots crunching on rock salt, and stood there like an idiot holding the wig box. She looked up, startled. Her eyes were red, mascara running in black rivers down paper-white cheeks. Up close, she was beautiful in the way that makes your chest hurt. High cheekbones, huge hazel eyes, trembling mouth. The kind of beauty that usually gets you saved, not abandoned. I'm sorry, she whispered, wiping her face with the sleeve of the jacket. I can't. Tomorrow is my wedding, and I look like this, and I can't afford. She gestured helplessly at her bare scalp. My fiancé swears it doesn't matter, but his mother already hates me, and I can't walk down the aisle looking like a cancer patient. The word cancer punched me in the throat, because that's what I was now. A cancer patient, official, card-carrying. I looked at the box in my hands, then at her, then at the empty space where my future used to be. I opened the box, broke the gold seal, and lifted out the wig. It was perfect. Long, soft waves, the color of summer wheat. The kind of hair people write songs about. I knelt in front of her, right there on the dirty concrete, and gently placed it on her head. She froze. I adjusted the lace front, tucked a few strands behind her ears the way the stylist had shown me on the video. It fit like it had been made for her. "Look," I said softly. There was a side mirror on the car next to us. She turned slowly, afraid to hope. The girl in the reflection looked like a bride, like a dream, like tomorrow could still be beautiful. She touched the hair with trembling fingers, then looked at me with something close to terror. "I can't take this," she whispered. "This is yours. You need it." I laughed, and this time it didn't sound broken. "Honey, I just found out I'm dying and my husband stole every penny we had. I think today is the day I stopped needing things." She started crying again, but different now. She threw her arms around me and sobbed into my shoulder, saying, "Thank you," over and over until the words lost meaning and became just sound. I held her, a stranger. On the coldest day of my life, I held her like I wished someone would hold me. When she finally pulled back, she tried to give me money, crumpled 20s from her purse, but I closed her fingers around them. "Buy her something blue," I said, "and dance with your dad so hard his shoes fall off." She laughed through tears. "Will you at least tell me your name?" "Laura," I said. "Laura Bennett. And you go be happy, okay? Someone should." She hugged me one last time, fierce and quick, then ran toward the elevator, the wig bouncing like real hair in the wind. I stood there a long time after she was gone, staring at my reflection in the dark car window. Balding, broke, dying Laura. I looked like exactly what I was. A woman the world had finished with. I got back in the Honda, closed the door, and rested my forehead on the steering wheel. That's when I heard the engines. At first I thought it was a convoy of ambulances, but the sound was too deep, too synchronized. I looked up. 30 black armored Suburbans, matte black. No badges, windows darker than midnight, were rolling into the parking garage in perfect formation. They moved like a military unit, silent and lethal. One by one they boxed in my beat-up 12-year-old Honda Civic until I was in the center of a perfect circle of tinted glass and Michigan plates that probably cost more than my house. My heart slammed against my ribs. For one insane second I thought Mark had hired someone to finish the job, get rid of the sick wife so he could keep the insurance money he hadn't realized was already gone. The driver's door of the closest Suburban opened. A tall man stepped out, mid-60s, maybe 70. Steel gray hair cut short, face like carved granite. He wore a black cashmere overcoat that probably cost more than my yearly salary used to be, and shoes so polished they reflected the garage lights. Behind him, men in black suits and earpieces fanned out. Not threatening, just present. He walked straight to my window and knocked once, polite but firm. I rolled it down with the manual crank because the electric stopped working last year. "Mrs. Laura Bennett?" His voice was deep, cultured. The kind you hear giving TED Talks about global finance. I managed a nod. "My name is Victor Langford." He reached into his coat and produced a simple white card, gold lettering. "No title, just a name and a phone number. You just gave my daughter the only thing she wanted for her wedding tomorrow." The world tilted. The beautiful bald bride-to-be, the girl I'd handed my future to on a concrete curb. Victor Langford. Even I knew that name. Langford Pharmaceuticals, the company that made half the cancer drugs in the world and charged so much for them that people sold their houses to afford one more month. The man Forbes called the most feared CEO in America. The man whose net worth had its own Wikipedia page. He looked at me for a long moment, something complicated moving behind those gunmetal eyes. "Laura," he said quietly, "I've spent the last 6 months pretending to be people I'm not. Walking hospital parking lots and chemo wards in disguises, trying to find one, just one person, who would still show kindness when they had every reason to hoard it for themselves." He glanced at the wig box on my passenger seat, now empty. "You're the first." Then he stepped back and opened my car door like a chauffeur. "Would you come with me, please? I think it's time the world gave something back to you. 30 black Suburbans, one dying woman, and the man who could buy and sell fate itself standing in a hospital parking garage on Valentine's Day, holding the door for me like I was someone who still mattered." I took his hand, and that was the day I started living again. The inside of Victor Langford's Suburban smelled like new leather, cedar, and something faintly medicinal, like the antiseptic hand gel they use in hospitals, but expensive. I sat in the second row, seat warmer already on, a cashmere blanket draped over my lap before I even realized someone had done it. The door closed with a sound like a bank vault. Victor sat across from me, not beside me. There was a small table between us, polished walnut, with 2 bottles of water and a single white orchid in a crystal bud vase. The convoy started moving in perfect silence. No horns, no revving engines. Just 30 identical beasts gliding out of the garage like a funeral procession in reverse. I found my voice. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere quiet," he said. "Somewhere you can scream or cry or ask every question you deserve to ask. And somewhere my daughter can thank you properly when she's done hugging her mother and screaming at me for letting her think. I was a homeless man for 3 months. His mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile I'd seen on his face. I looked out the tinted window. We were already on the expressway, downtown Chicago shrinking behind us. The city I'd lived in my whole life suddenly looked small and gray and tired. Mr. Langford, Victor. The name felt strange in my mouth. "I don't understand any of this." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the way men do when they're about to tell you something that will hurt. 6 months ago, my daughter Emily was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Stage 3, she's 26. Getting married tomorrow to a boy who loves her more than his next breath. The wedding was planned before anyone knew she was sick. She refused to postpone it. Said if she only had 1 good day left, she wanted to spend it becoming Mrs. Daniel Harper. He paused, looked out the window for a moment. I watched my child lose her hair, lose 30 pounds, lose the ability to walk some days. And I could buy her every drug on the planet, fly her to Switzerland for experimental protocols, but I couldn't buy her 1 normal day where she didn't feel like a patient. She told me the thing that hurt worst wasn't the chemo. It was knowing she'd be bald on her wedding day, that her new mother-in-law would look at her and see cancer instead of a bride. I swallowed hard. "So I did the only thing I could think of," he continued. "I started walking hospital parking lots in disguises. Sometimes a janitor, sometimes a homeless vet, sometimes just an old man with a limp. I carried a sign that said, 'Lost everything to medical bills. Anything helps.' I wanted to see who still had kindness left when life had already taken everything from them. Doctors walked past, nurses, pastors, even other cancer patients clutching their own wigs like life rafts. Not one person in 6 months gave me something they actually needed themselves." He looked at me then, really looked, until you. You gave away the one thing that would have let you pretend, for 5 more minutes, that you weren't sick. You gave it to a stranger who was crying louder than you were. I stared at my hands. They were shaking. Victor reached into his coat and pulled out a tablet. He turned it toward me. On the screen was a frozen security camera image, me kneeling in the parking garage, placing the wig on Emily's head. The timestamp was 4:47 p.m., less than an hour ago. "I have footage from 37 hospitals," he said quietly. "Thousands of hours. You're the only one." The Suburban slowed. We turned into a private gate that opened before we even reached it. A long driveway lined with birch trees, still bare from winter. At the end was a compound. Low, modern, all glass and stone. Built into the side of a hill overlooking Lake Michigan. The kind of place that doesn't have an address, just coordinates. The convoy stopped. Doors opened in perfect synchronization. Men in black suits stood at attention, but their eyes weren't cold. Some of them were crying. Victor opened my door himself. "Welcome to Northlight," he said. "It's not a hospital. It's not a hotel. It's the place we bring people we're going to save." I stepped out. The wind off the lake was brutal, but someone was already there with a long camel-colored coat holding it for me. I slid my arms in. It fit perfectly. Inside, the house was warm and quiet. No marble mausoleum, no gold fixtures, just light. Huge windows, honey-colored wood floors, fireplaces big enough to stand in. Fresh flowers everywhere, white tulips my favorite. Though I'd never told anyone that in my life. A woman in a navy suit approached. Mid-40s, kind eyes, clipboard. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm Dr. Sarah Park. I'll be your primary physician starting tonight. We've already pulled your scans and records from St. Mary's. We're going to go over everything together. No rush." "But first," Emily insisted. She gestured down the hall. I followed, legs numb. We entered a sunroom that looked out over the frozen lake. Emily was there, standing in the middle of the room in jeans and an oversized Northwestern hoodie, the wig I'd given her shining under the skylight. When she saw me, she let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and ran. She threw her arms around me so hard we both almost fell. "You're here," she kept saying. "You're really here." Over her shoulder I saw a man, tall, dark-haired, wearing a simple black sweater. Daniel, I assumed. He was holding Emily's hand like he'd never let go, and his eyes were red. Emily finally pulled back, cupping my face with both hands. "I'm getting married tomorrow," she said, voice shaking. "And I want you there. Not in the back. Not as a guest. I want you to stand up with me. My mom has her sisters. I don't have anyone else. Please say yes." I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Victor appeared in the doorway. "Emily, let her breathe." "No," Emily said fiercely. "Dad, she gave me my wedding. She gave me normal. I'm keeping her." I laughed then. A real laugh, rusty from disuse. "I don't have anything to wear," I said. Emily grinned through tears. "Vera Wang is upstairs right now, hemming 3 options in your size. Dad sent the jet for her an hour ago." "Of course he did." Dr. Park touched my elbow gently. "Whenever you're ready, we'll do blood work and a full restaging." "You haven't eaten today?" I shook my head. "There's dinner waiting, and then we'll get you settled. You have a suite on the East Wing, Lakeview." I looked around at these people. These strangers who were treating me like I was the most important person in the world. "Why?" I asked Victor. The question I still couldn't answer. "Why me?" He stepped closer, voice low. "Because tomorrow, I'm going to ask you to help me fix something that's been broken for a very long time. And I need someone who understands what it feels like to lose everything in a single day. Someone who still chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier." He glanced at Emily, then back to me. "Also," he said, softer, "my daughter doesn't let go of people she loves. And she already loves you, so you're stuck with us." Dinner was roast chicken and mashed potatoes and green beans with almonds. Comfort food, served family style at a long wooden table that could seat 20. Emily sat on one side of me, Daniel on the other. Victor at the head. Dr. Park came and went, checking vitals between bites like it was normal. I ate until I was stuffed, until my stomach hurt in a good way for the first time in weeks. Afterward, Emily walked me to my suite herself. It was bigger than my entire downstairs back home. A fireplace already lit, a bed piled with pillows. On the dresser, a framed photo of me and Emily in the parking garage, taken from the security footage, already printed and waiting. Someone had written on the mat in silver ink, "The day the world got a little kinder." I started crying then, couldn't help it. Emily sat on the bed with me and held my hand until I was done. "My dad isn't what people think," she said quietly. "He's terrifying in boardrooms. He's destroyed companies that hurt patients. But he's also the man who read me Harry Potter every night I was in the hospital, even when he had to fly in from Tokyo to do it. He's complicated." I wiped my face. "I don't know how to be part of this world." "You already are," she said. "You just haven't seen the paperwork yet." She kissed my cheek and left me alone. I took the longest shower of my life. The bathroom had heated floors and a rain shower that felt like forgiveness. When I came out, there was a silk pajama set laid out on the bed, monogrammed LB in navy thread. My size, of course. I fell asleep to the sound of waves against ice, dreaming of Aruba and margaritas I hoped tasted like regret. The next morning, Valentine's Day, I woke up to a text from an unknown number. "Mark, Laura, please pick up. I made a mistake. Jessica left me. The money is almost gone. I'm coming home." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I blocked the number, turned off my phone, and went to watch a girl I barely knew marry G. The love of her life, wearing the hair I would never need again. Because somewhere between the parking garage and this impossible house on the lake, I had stopped being Laura Bennett, dying ICU nurse with an empty bank account. I had become someone else entirely. And tomorrow, Victor Langford was going to tell me who. February 15th, 2025. Emily Langford became Emily Harper on the most perfect winter day Illinois had seen in 20 years. The ceremony was held in the glass-walled pavilion at Northlight that jutted out over the frozen lake like a diamond suspended in midair. 300 white roses, a string quartet playing canon in D, and a rabbi and a priest co-officiating because Daniel was Jewish and Emily had been raised Catholic, and they'd decided love didn't need to pick a team. I stood on Emily's side in a floor-length gown, the color of champagne. The silk cool against my skin. My own hair, what was left of it, was hidden under a delicate lace cap that the stylist had pinned with tiny pearls. I looked like someone who belonged in this world. I still didn't feel like it. When Emily walked down the aisle on Victor's arm, the wig I'd given her, catching the winter sunlight like real gold, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. She was radiant, not in spite of cancer, but somehow because of it, like the disease had burned away everything that wasn't essential and left only light. Daniel cried when he saw her, openly, the kind of tears men are told never to shed in public. Victor's jaw trembled when he placed her hand in Daniel's. And when the rabbi asked if anyone had reason these two should not be joined, I swear half the guests turned to look at me as if I, the stranger who had stumbled into their lives 24 hours ago, might actually stand up and object. I just smiled, because I had never seen two people more clearly meant to be. At the reception, the toasts went on forever. Victor's was short. My daughter taught me that miracles sometimes come bald and crying in hospital. Parking lots, he said, raising his glass to me. To Laura Bennett, who reminded us that kindness is the only currency that never loses value. 300 people turned and applauded me like I'd done something heroic instead of just handing over 2 ounces of dead hair. I wanted to hide under the table. Instead, I danced. First with Daniel's 92-year-old grandfather, who told me I had good hips for a shiksa, then with Victor, who moved like a man who'd taken lessons but hated every minute of them. Halfway through the song, he spoke against my ear, so low only I could hear. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, my office. We need to talk about your future, Laura, and about Mark. My feet almost stopped moving. How do you know his name? He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. I know everything now. The song ended. He kissed my cheek like a father, not a billionaire, and walked away. I didn't sleep that night. At 8:57 a.m., I was standing outside a set of double doors made of dark wood and brushed steel. Dr. Sarah Park appeared beside me in soft gray scrubs, holding 2 cups of coffee. Fuel, she said, handing me one. And fair warning, Victor doesn't do gentle when it's important. She knocked once and opened the door. Victor's office wasn't an office. It was mission control. One wall was floor-to-ceiling screens showing real-time data, stock prices, FDA approval pipelines, hospital profit margins, cancer survival curves by zip code. Another wall held framed photos. Victor with presidents, with Nelson Mandela, with a little bald girl in a hospital bed who had to be Emily at 16. He stood when I entered, came around the desk and hugged me. Actually hugged me. Sit, he said, gesturing to a sofa by the windows. We have a lot to cover. He didn't waste time. First, your new scans came in at 4 a.m. My stomach dropped. He slid a tablet across the coffee table. On it, side-by-side PET scans. The left one was mine from St. Mary's, lit up like a Christmas tree of metastases. The right one was dated yesterday, taken in the basement imaging suite I didn't even remember walking into. The right one was almost dark. I stared, not breathing. Impossible, I whispered. Not impossible, Victor said. Just unpublished. We've been running a phase 1 trial of a bispecific antibody plus a targeted radionuclide for the exact phenotype you have. Off-label compassionate use basis. You signed the consent somewhere. Between the chicken and the chocolate. Cake last night. Sarah witnessed it. I looked at Dr. Park. She nodded. 3 monthly infusions, she said gently. Side effects are significant, but the response rate in the 12 patients we've treated so far is 100%. 8 are officially NED, no evidence of disease. I started shaking. Victor knelt in front of me, took both my hands. Laura, you're going to live. The tears came so hard I couldn't see. He held me until I was done, the way you hold a child who's skinned her knee. Not a 52-year-old woman who'd been handed her life back on a silver platter. When I could speak again, I asked the only question that mattered. What do you want from me? He sat back on his heels, eyes serious. I want you to help me burn the system down and build something better in its ashes. He stood, walked to the data wall, and touched a graph showing the average cost of ovarian cancer treatment in the United States. $12,000 in the first year alone. This is obscene, he said. We make the drugs. We set the prices. And then we watch families bankrupt themselves for one more month with someone they love. I've been part of the problem for 30 years. He turned to me. I'm stepping down as CEO of Langford Pharmaceuticals in 60 days. The board doesn't know yet. I'm creating an independent foundation, $5 billion, seed money. It's mandate. Make sure no one ever has to choose between dying and going broke again. He walked back, sat across from me. I want you to run it. I laughed, actually laughed in his face. Victor, I'm an ICU nurse from Joliet who can't balance her own checkbook. I don't know how to run a foundation. You know how to take care of terrified people at 3 a.m. when they're vomiting blood and think they're dying alone. You know how to hold a husband's hand while his wife flatlines. You know what it feels like to hear, there's nothing more we can do, and still find a way to give someone dignity. He leaned forward. I can hire 1,000 MBAs to push paper and glad-hand senators. I need one person who will never forget what it feels like to sit in that beige room and be told the treatment that might save your life costs more than your house. I stared at him. The salary is $1 million a year to start, he continued. Full medical, obviously. Housing allowance, security if you want it, and total control over how the money is spent. No board, no oversight except mine, and I'm giving you my proxy. You answer only to your own conscience. I opened my mouth, closed it. There's more, he said quietly. He touched the screen on the table. A new image appeared. Mark and Jessica on a yacht in Aruba. Time-stamped yesterday. Mark looked thinner. Jessica was already wearing a new diamond on her left hand. Bigger than the one he'd given me 29 years ago. I've had people watching them since you told Emily your story, Victor said. The money he stole? It's almost gone. Jessica has expensive tastes. They're staying on a boat owned by a man named Carlos Reyes, Colombian. Questionable import-export business. Mark thinks he's found a new sugar mama. Jessica thinks she's upgrading. They're both wrong. He met my eyes. Say the word and by Monday morning, Mark will be extradited back to the U.S. facing federal wire fraud charges. The money can be recovered, most of it anyway. Jessica will be deported. Reyes will disappear them both if they become liabilities. I can make it gentle, or I can make it Old Testament. Your call. I felt something cold and sharp bloom in my chest. Revenge. It tasted like copper. I thought of Mark's text yesterday. I made a mistake. I'm coming home. I thought of 29 years of birthdays, of hospital shifts I worked so he could finish his MBA, of the way he kissed my forehead when our dog died, of the way he couldn't look at me once the word cancer left the doctor's mouth. I looked Victor in the eye. No, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Let him keep the money, I said. Let him keep Jessica and Aruba and whatever comes after. Some prisons don't have walls. Victor studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. Understood. He stood, offered his hand. So, do we have a deal, Madam Chairman? I took his hand. It was warm, steady, calloused in a way that surprised me. We have a deal. He smiled then, the first real, full smile I'd seen from him. It changed his whole face. Excellent. Your first official act is lunch with the President of the United States next week. She wants to personally thank the woman who made her new cancer moonshot possible. I laughed, a little hysterical. Second act, he continued. We're flying to Rochester tonight. The Mayo Clinic has a patient who was denied our new drug because her insurance said it was experimental. You're going to sit with her, hold her hand, and then we're going to change the definition of experimental. He walked me to the door. Third act, go buy a dress. Something red. You're about to become the most famous woman in American medicine, and I want them to see you coming. I stepped into the hallway, legs shaking. Sarah was waiting with a wheelchair, protocol for post-scan patients. As she pushed me toward the elevator, I looked back once. Victor was still in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching me with an expression I couldn't name. What happens now? I asked Sarah. She grinned. Now, Laura Bennett, you get to decide who lives and who dies, metaphorically speaking. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time since the world ended twice in one day, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready to write it myself. March 3rd, 2025. 3 weeks after Emily's wedding, 2 weeks after I signed the papers that made me chairman and president of the Langford Patient First Foundation, and exactly 1 week after my first infusion of the drug that was burning the cancer out of my body like holy fire. I had learned 3 things very quickly. 1. $1 billion sounds like a lot until you start trying to fix. American healthcare with it? 2. When you control $5 billion and 0 patients, people answer your calls on the first ring, even at 3 a.m. 3. Revenge tastes better when you don't have to lift a finger. We began in Rochester, Minnesota, exactly as Victor promised. The patient's name was Marisol Ortega, 41 years old, mother of 3, metastatic breast cancer that had spread to her brain. Her insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, had denied the new Langford bispecific because it was investigational. Translation: we hadn't paid their executives enough yet to put it on formulary. Marisol had 8 weeks left, maybe 10. I walked into her room at St. Mary's Hospital, no relation to the one in Chicago, wearing jeans and a blazer, no wig, no makeup, just a baseball cap that said, "Badass in remission." Victor had tried to send security. I sent them home. Marisol was asleep when I arrived. Her husband Carlos sitting beside the bed holding her hand like it was the only thing keeping her on earth. When he saw me, he stood up fast, confused. I introduced myself in Spanish. 30 years in the ICU had made me fluent in comfort and curse words in 4 languages. "Senor Ortega, my name is Laura Bennett. I'm here because your wife is going to live." He started crying before I finished the sentence. 3 hours later, we had Marisol on a Langford jet to Houston, MD. Anderson had agreed to take her immediately, after I personally called the head of oncology and promised to fund his entire research wing for the next decade if he cleared a bed. The drug was already waiting in the pharmacy with her name on it. Blue Cross Blue Shield reversed their denial at 4:17 p.m. that same day. They sent flowers. I had them delivered to the janitor's closet. Word spread like wildfire on a dry prairie. By the end of that first week, my inbox, created literally 7 days, earlier had 41,000 messages, mothers sending photos of bald children, husbands begging for 1 more year with their wives, teenagers asking if we could help their dads who were too proud to ask. We hired 20 people just to read the emails. We said yes to the first 1,000 cases that met criteria. No applications, no income verification, no 6-month appeals process, just yes. We paid retail price for every drug, every scan, every hospital bed. $587 million gone in 9 days. Victor watched the numbers like a proud father. "Let them scream," he told the board when they called an emergency meeting. "We're not a charity. We're a declaration of war." The first shot across the bow came on March 17th. A 12-year-old boy in Memphis named Jamal Washington needed a bone marrow transplant. His perfect match was a donor in Germany. But St. Jude Children's Research Hospital couldn't get United Healthcare to pay the $187,000, transport and anti-rejection, meds because the donor was out of network. United Healthcare's medical director, a man named Dr. Paul Whitmore, personally signed the denial letter. I flew to Memphis myself. I walked into Jamal's room with a check for $250,000 made out to St. Jude, a German donor already on a Langford jet, and a live camera crew from CNN. Then I called Dr. Whitmore on speakerphone in front of Jamal, his mother, and half the oncology floor. "Dr. Whitmore, Laura Bennett from the Langford Patient First Foundation. I'm calling to let you know we've covered Jamal Washington's transplant in full. You can reverse your denial now, or you can explain to the country tonight why you tried to kill a 12-year-old over paperwork." The call lasted 47 seconds. The reversal letter came in 6 minutes. That night, our Langford list started. Trending. Patients posting their denial letters with the caption, "Waiting for Laura." Insurance stocks dropped 8% in after-hours trading. I didn't sleep. I sat on the balcony of the Peabody Hotel watching the Mississippi roll by, drinking sweet tea like nothing had changed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown Aruba number. "Mark, saw you on CNN. You look thin. Are you eating? Please call me. I'm worried." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I forwarded it to Victor with a single line. "Make sure he sees every segment." The next morning we opened an office in Washington, D.C., 3 blocks from the Capitol. I hired the meanest healthcare lobbyist in town, a woman named Regina Cho, who had once made a senator cry on C-SPAN, and gave her a simple directive. "I want every member of Congress to have a Jamal in their district by November." She grinned like Christmas came early. By the end of March, we had paid for 4,312 patients. Total spend, $1.9 billion. The foundation's Instagram, launched by Emily, had 4.7 million followers. The top post was a video of Marisol Ortega walking out of MD Anderson cancer-free, her 3 kids running to her in slow motion. 68 million views. Comment section, nothing but crying emojis and, "Where is this woman so I can hug her?" I still lived in my little blue house in Joliet. I refused to move. Every night I came home to the same creaky stairs, the same neighbor who waved over the fence, the same coffee mug. Mark had bought me on our honeymoon that I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Some nights I sat on the kitchen floor and cried because the silence was too loud. Some mornings I woke up laughing because I was alive. The infusions were brutal. Fever, bone pain, nausea that left me praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Sarah flew in every 3rd Friday to oversee them personally. She slept on my couch and held my hair back when it started growing again, soft as a baby's. On April 2nd, Victor called me at 2:14 a.m. "We've been sued," he said, voice calm. "By who?" "Everyone. PHRMA, the big 3 PBMs, AHA, and half the Fortune 500 health plans. They want a preliminary injunction to stop us from destabilizing the market." Hearing is April 14th. Federal Court, Northern District of Illinois. Judge Margaret Chen. I laughed into the phone. "Good, let them try." "You need to be there," he said. "The whole country will be watching." "I'll be there," I said. In red. April 14th, 2025. The courtroom in the Dirksen Federal Building was packed. Cameras in the hallway, protesters outside with signs that said, "Laura is my health insurance," and "Big Pharma hates kindness." I walked in wearing a red Carolina Herrera suit Emily had picked out. No wig, hair now a short silver-gray pixie that made me look like I could bench press a Buick. The plaintiff's table had 23 lawyers in $10,000 suits. I sat alone. Judge Chen, a tiny woman with a voice like a blade, called the hearing to order. The lead attorney for the insurance consortium, a man named Harlan Grant, who looked like he'd been born in a pinstripe suit, stood up. "Your Honor, the defendant's actions constitute reckless interference with contractual obligations and threaten the financial stability of the entire American healthcare system." I stood up without waiting to be called. "Your Honor," I said, "may I speak?" Chen raised an eyebrow. "You may." I walked to the podium. "Mr. Grant just said my foundation is threatening the stability of the American healthcare system. I agree. The system that lets a 12-year-old die because his donor lives in the wrong country is not stable. It's barbaric." I turned to the gallery. 300 people. Half of them patients we'd helped. Many wearing T-shirts that said, "I'm alive because of Laura." These people are not collateral damage. They are the point. I looked back at the bench. "Your Honor, we will not stop paying for care until the day comes that no American has to choose between bankruptcy and death. If that destabilizes a system built on profit over people, then I will hand you the hammer myself." The courtroom erupted. Judge Chen banged her gavel so hard I thought it would break. She denied the injunction in a 23-page opinion that was quoted on the front page of the New York Times the next day. Insurance stocks fell another 14%. That night, I went home to Joliet, took off the red suit, put on sweatpants, and made boxed mac and cheese. My phone buzzed with another text from Aruba. "Mark. They took the boat. Jessica left with Carlos. I have $47 and a bus ticket to Miami. Laura, please." "I'm so sorry." I stared at the screen. Then I did something I'd been waiting to do for months. I called him. He picked up on the first ring, voice hoarse. "Laura?" "Hi, Mark." A long silence. I could hear him crying. "I saw you on TV," he whispered. "You look beautiful, strong. I'm proud of—" "Don't," I cut him off. "Don't you dare." Another silence. "I'm dying, Laura. The doctor here says liver failure. Too much drinking. I don't have insurance. I don't have anything." I closed my eyes. "I know," I said quietly. "I just wanted to hear your voice one more time. To say I'm sorry. I was scared. I made the worst mistake of my life. I thought of Marisol walking out of the hospital, of Jamal blowing out 13 candles last week, of the 4312 people who were breathing tonight because we said yes. I forgive you," I said. He sobbed. "But Mark, that bus ticket to Miami, use it. Keep going south. There's a clinic in Costa Rica that treats uninsured Americans. They'll take care of you. The foundation will pay." He couldn't speak. "Goodbye, Mark." I hung up. Then I opened my laptop and authorized $180,000. Transfer to Clinica Biblica in San Jose. Enough for a full liver transplant and a year of rehab. I didn't tell anyone. Some mercies you give quietly. The next morning, I flew to Washington for a closed-door meeting with the Senate Help Committee. Regina Cho met me at the airport holding a coffee and a grin. Ready to make grown men cry on national television again? I took the coffee. Let's go break something that needs breaking. Because $5 billion was just the beginning. And I was only getting started. May 28, 2025, room 430, Dirksen Senate Office Building, Washington, D.C. Live on C-SPAN, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and every major streaming platform in America. The hearing was titled, Examining the Role of Nonprofit Entities in the Disruption of Established Healthcare Payment Models. Translation, Big Pharma and the insurance cartel had finally convinced enough senators to drag me in front of cameras and try to bleed me in public. There were 19 senators on the dais, 17 men, 2 women. Average net worth $28 million. Average amount received from healthcare. PACs in the last election cycle, 1.4 million each. I sat alone at the witness table. No lawyers, no staff. Just me, a glass of water, and a red leather folder that held exactly one photograph. The chairman, Senator Richard Dick Harlan, RTX, opened with the kind of smile that looked friendly if you'd never seen a rattlesnake. Mrs. Bennett, he began, you've spent over $3 billion in less than 90 days. Some would call that reckless. Others might call it grandstanding. How do you respond to critics who say, you're buying headlines instead of fixing systemic problems? I leaned into the microphone. Senator, I respond by introducing you to Anthony Morales. I opened the red folder and held up the photograph. A little boy, maybe 6 years old, oxygen tubes in his nose, bald from chemo, holding a handmade sign that read, Thank you, Laura, in purple marker. Anthony has neuroblastoma. His parents were quoted, $1.9 million for the CAR-T, therapy that could save him. Their insurance denied it as experimental. We paid. Anthony celebrated his 7th birthday last week. He's in full remission. I have 43,000 more pictures just like this one. Would you like to see them all, or should we move on? The room went dead quiet. Senator Harlan cleared his throat. Moving on, he said tightly. For the next 2 hours, they took turns. Senator Klein, DCT, who had received $2.3 million from United Healthcare, asked if I was aware that my actions were driving up premiums for working families. Senator Morales, RFL, wanted to know if I had coordinated with foreign governments to bypass FDA regulations. Senator Elizabeth Warren, DMA, stayed silent most of the time, arms crossed, watching like a hawk. Then came Senator Tom McAllister, RKY, freshman, former coal executive, and the man who had introduced S-847, the Patient First Protection Act, a bill that would effectively cap what private foundations could spend on individual patients and force us to route all funds through insurance companies first. He leaned forward, voice dripping with Kentucky honey. Mrs. Bennett, do you believe one woman should have the power to decide who lives and who dies in this country? I didn't hesitate. No, Senator. I believe 19 senators who take millions from the same companies that profit when children die should not have that power. And yet here we are. The gallery gasped. C-SPAN cameras zoomed in. McAllister's face went red. Young lady, I'm 52, I interrupted. Old enough to have buried patients because their insurance ran out. Old enough to know what it feels like when your husband steals your life savings. The same day you're told you're dying. Old enough to recognize a shakedown when I see one. I turned to the dais. You want to talk about power? Let's talk about the power to deny a 7-year-old a bone marrow transplant because the donor lives in Germany. That's not my power. That's yours. You wrote the laws that let them do it. I reached into my folder again and pulled out a stack of papers 3 inches thick. These are the denial letters we received just this week. 4,211 of them. I've highlighted the best parts. Page 47, treatment not medically necessary. The patient was in a coma. Page 118, alternative therapy available. The alternative was hospice. Shall I keep going? McAllister tried to interrupt. I spoke over him. You passed a law in 2003 that says insurance. Companies can't be sued for wrongful death if they follow their own internal guidelines. You call that tort reform. I call it a license to kill for profit. The room erupted. The chairman banged his gavel so hard the handle cracked. In the chaos, Senator Warren finally spoke. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. The witness is correct on the safe harbor provision, and I move we enter these denial letters into the record. Seconded by Senator Sanders before the chairman could stop him. Motion passed 11-8. The hearing was supposed to last 4 hours. It ended in 2.5 when half the senators suddenly had schedule conflicts. As I walked out, reporters swarmed. Mrs. Bennett, will you comply if S-847 passes? I stopped at the top of the marble steps, cameras flashing like lightning. If Congress passes a law that says dying children have to wait for insurance approval before they can live, I will break that law every single day until they put me in prison. And I will do it on live television so every American can see what their government has become. The clip got 180 million views in 24 hours. That night, the Langford Patient First Foundation received $487 million in individual donations ranging from $5 to $50 million. The memo line on most of them read the same thing. For Anthony, we were no longer a foundation. We were a movement. June 15, 2025, the White House called. The president wanted a private meeting, just the two of us and Victor. We met in the residence, not the Oval. Fireplace crackling. Dogs running around, no press. She hugged me the moment I walked in. My niece had leukemia, she said quietly. You paid for her transplant last month. She's home now. Then she got down to business. I can't endorse everything you're doing, she said. But I can give you something better. Executive Order 15118 goes out tomorrow morning. Any drug with a list price over $100,000 a year is now subject to federal price negotiation under Medicare Part D. We're starting with the top 20 offenders. Your data made it possible. She handed me a pen. I'd like you to be there when I sign it. I started crying in the White House. Victor just smiled like a man who had waited 30 years for this moment. July 4th weekend, Emily and Daniel threw a party at Northlight. 500 people who had been saved by the foundation. Marisol brought her kids. Jamal's mom brought a sheet cake that said, Laura is my insurance in blue icing. I danced with Anthony until his little legs gave out. At midnight, Victor found me on the dock watching fireworks over the lake. He handed me a glass of champagne. 6 months ago, you were bald, broke, and dying, he said. 6 months ago, you were pretending to be homeless to see if humanity still existed. We clinked glasses. Truce? He asked. Never, I said. There's still work to do. He laughed, then grew serious. Mark died yesterday. I went very still. Liver failure, he continued. The clinic in Costa Rica called. He asked them to tell you he was sorry and that he was proud of the woman you became. I looked out at the water, tears sliding down my cheeks. I hope he found peace, I said finally. Victor put an arm around my shoulders. He found mercy, he said. You gave him that. We stood there a long time, watching colors explode in the sky. August 1st, my final infusion. Sarah drew my blood herself. Ran the tests in the mobile lab she kept in the back of her SUV now. K125, 8. Normal is under 35. PET scan, completely dark. She hugged me so hard my ribs creaked. You're cured, Laura. Officially, permanently, disgustingly cured. I laughed until I couldn't breathe. That night I drove home to Joliet one last time. I packed 3 suitcases, left the coffee mug from our honeymoon on the kitchen counter, and locked the door behind me. The little blue house sold the next week to a young couple with a baby on the way. They sent me a thank you note for leaving the garden in bloom. I never went back. September 9th, 2025. The new headquarters of the Langford Patient First Foundation opened in Chicago. 10 stories of glass and light, a garden on every balcony, a clinic on the first floor that would never turn anyone away. On the top floor, my office. Simple wood desk, framed photo of Anthony, and a red leather chair I bought myself. The first thing I did was hang a sign above the door. It had only 5 words. Kindness is the only investment that never fails. I stood there a long time reading it over and over. Then I rolled up my sleeves. Because $3 billion was gone, $5 billion more were coming, and there were still 43,000 pictures waiting. And somewhere out there right now, a woman was sitting in a parking garage deciding whether hope was worth the price. I knew exactly what I would tell her. Give the wig away, darling. The rest will take care of itself. October 15th, 2025, 8 months to the day since. I gave away a $2,800 wig in a freezing parking garage. I woke up in the penthouse apartment above the new headquarters. The entire east wall was glass, and Chicago was on fire with sunrise. I stood there in an old t-shirt and socks, coffee in hand, watching the city that had once felt like the edge of the world now looked like the center of everything. My phone buzzed on the counter. Emily, turn on CNN, right now. I did. The Chiron read, Senate passes, Bennett Amendment 7822. Caps out-of-pocket costs at $2,000 a year for all Americans. Effective January 1st, 2027. The anchor was almost shouting. Named after Laura Bennett, the former ICU nurse turned billionaire philanthropist, whose foundation single-handedly forced the healthcare reform debate. This amendment to the reconciliation bill is being called the most significant patient protection legislation since the Affordable Care Act. White House sources say the president will sign it tomorrow in a Rose Garden ceremony and has personally requested Ms. Bennett be present. They cut to file footage of me outside the Capitol in the red suit. Hair now a sleek silver bob, eyes fierce. I started shaking so hard I had to sit down. Victor called 2 minutes later. I'm outside with the car, he said, voice thick. Get dressed. We're going to Washington. Emily's already on the jet with Daniel and half the staff. We're shutting the office for the day. Everyone's coming. I laughed through tears. You planned this? No, he said quietly. You did. We just held the door open. October 16th, 2025. Rose Garden, the White House. The weather was perfect. Blue sky, crisp air, the scent of late roses everywhere. There were 43 chairs in the front row, one for each 1,000 patients we had saved in the first wave. Anthony sat in the very center, legs swinging, wearing a tiny navy suit and a grin that could power the city. Marisol was on my left, her youngest daughter asleep on her lap. Jamal's mom was on my right, holding a tissue she hadn't stopped using since we landed. The president spoke for 7 minutes. She never once looked at her notes. Today we stop asking Americans to choose between medicine and food. Today we say that in the richest nation on earth, no one will die because they can't afford to live. She turned to me. Laura Bennett sat in a doctor's office and heard the worst news a human being can hear. Then she heard the second worst, that the treatment that might save her life would bankrupt her family. Instead of giving up, she gave away the one thing that would have let her pretend she wasn't sick. And in that single act of radical kindness, she reminded all of us what America is supposed to be. She signed the bill with a flourish. Then she handed me the pen. This belongs to you, she said. The cameras flashed so bright I saw spots. Afterward, in the receiving line, a reporter from the Times asked the question everyone had been whispering for months. Ms. Bennett, Forbes now estimates your personal compensation and deferred assets from the foundation at just over $1.1 billion. You're officially the fastest self-made female billionaire in American history. What does that feel like? I looked at Anthony waving from the front row, at Marisol laughing with her kids, at Emily wiping tears while Daniel filmed everything on his phone. It feels, I said slowly, like the universe has a sense of humor. That night we had dinner on the South Lawn, long tables under string lights, barbecue and mac and cheese because I refused anything fancier. The president sat between Anthony and Jamal and let them put ice cream on her pie. Victor found me later, standing by the Truman balcony watching the city sparkle. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, I'm selling the pharmaceutical company. I turned. What? Lock, stock, and patent portfolio to a nonprofit trust. The drugs will be priced at cost plus 10%, worldwide, forever. The board tried to stop me. I fired the ones who fought hardest. He shrugged like it was nothing. $5 billion was never enough, he said. This is the rest of it. I stared at him. You're giving away everything. He smiled, soft and tired and peaceful. I already got everything I wanted. My daughter danced at her wedding. My conscience is clean. And I get to watch the most extraordinary woman I've ever met change the world every single day. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small wrapped in tissue. I've been carrying this since February 14th, he said. He unfolded it. My old wig, cleaned, restyled, still perfect. I thought you might want it back now, he said, voice rough. For the days when you need to remember where you came from. I took it with shaking hands. Then I walked to the edge of the balcony and dropped it over the railing. We watched it float down like a blonde feather, disappearing into the dark. I don't need reminders anymore, I said. He slipped his hand into mine. November 2025, the foundation moved into its permanent stride. We opened 30 regional centers. Everyone had a garden on the roof and a sign that read, "You do not have to be rich to deserve to live." We hired the patients we had saved as patient advocates. Marisol ran the Houston Center. Jamal's mom ran Memphis. Anthony's grandmother ran pediatric outreach in Chicago and read stories to kids, getting chemo every Thursday. We started the Wig Tree Project. Anyone who received treatment paid for by the foundation left their wig on a sculpture in the lobby when they didn't need it anymore. Within weeks, the trees were heavy with honey blonde, chestnut, black, red, hundreds of them swaying in the wind like a forest of second chances. December 24th, 2025, Christmas Eve, 1 year exactly since the night my marriage ended on a park bench in the snow. I stood in the garden of the Chicago headquarters at midnight. Snow was falling, soft and silent. The entire staff, over 2,000 people now, had gathered without me knowing. They held candles. Someone started singing, "Silent Night." 2,000 voices rose into the cold air. Emily and Daniel stood beside me, her hand on her still flat stomach. She had told me that morning they were expecting. Victor stood on my other side. When the song ended, he cleared his throat. "1 year ago tonight," he said, voice carrying over the quiet crowd. "A woman sat in this city, heartbroken and dying, and chose kindness anyway. She didn't know it would start a revolution. She only knew someone else was colder than she was." He turned to me. "Laura Bennett, you gave away your boots once. Tonight we give something back to you." The lights came on. The entire garden had been transformed. Hundreds of pairs of boots, brown leather, exactly like the ones I gave Marcus, Victor that night, hung from invisible wires, floating above the snow like stars. Each one had a tiny silver tag. I walked closer, tears already falling. The tags were engraved. For Marisol, you walked again. For Jamal, you ran. For Anthony, you danced. For every name we had saved. And in the center, one single pair glowing under a spotlight. The tag read, "For Laura, you never walked alone again." I couldn't stand up anymore. I sank into the snow and sobbed, the big, ugly, healing kind. Victor knelt beside me, wrapped me in his arms the way he had the first night at Northlight. When I could finally speak, I looked up at him. "I think," I whispered, "this is what forgiveness feels like." He kissed my forehead, gentle and certain. "No, darling," he said. "This is what love looks like when it finally wins." Later, when everyone had gone inside for cocoa and the snow kept falling, Victor and I stayed in the garden. He reached into his coat one last time. "I have one more thing," he said. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, white gold, a single diamond shaped like a tiny star. "I'm 68 years old," he said, voice shaking for the first time I'd ever heard. "I've built empires and lost my wife and found my faith in humanity again. Because of you. I don't want to waste another day of whatever time I have left." He got down on one knee in the snow, not caring that his trousers were ruined. "Laura Bennett, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be half as brave as you are every single day?" I looked at him, at this man who had disguised himself as a beggar to see if goodness still existed, who had given away 2 fortunes because one woman gave him her boots. I thought of parking garages and black Suburbans, of wigs floating off balconies, of children who would never have to choose between medicine and dinner. I thought of the girl I used to be, sitting heartbroken on a bench, believing love was something you earned by making yourself small. And I thought of the woman I had become, the one who learned that love is something you give away until the world is forced to grow big enough to hold it. I slipped my hand into his. "Yes," I said. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring on my finger. It fit perfectly, of course it did. Somewhere above us, the boots swayed in the snow like bells. And for the first time in my entire life, I was not afraid of tomorrow. Because tomorrow and every day after belonged to the people we hadn't met yet. To the ones still waiting in parking garages. To the ones who would look up one day and see 30 black Suburbans surrounding their broken-down Honda. To the ones who would learn, the way I did, that kindness is never wasted. It just takes its time coming home. And when it does, it brings the whole damn world with it. December 31st, 2026, 1 year, 10 months, and 17 days after I gave away a wig in a hospital parking garage. The garden on the roof of the Chicago headquarters had become famous. News helicopters circled it every Christmas Eve now. trying to catch the floating boots lit from below like a constellation. Tourists came from Japan, Brazil, Norway, people who had never met me but knew my name the way previous generations knew. Rosa Parks or Mother Teresa. Tonight the garden was closed to the public. Tonight it belonged only to us. Victor and I had married quietly in June, on the summer solstice, in the same glass pavilion where Emily had danced at her wedding. I wore ivory lace and no wig. My hair had grown back thick and silver white, the color of moonlight on snow. Victor wore the same black suit he'd worn the night he pretended to be homeless. He said it was the only suit that ever really fit him. We kept our own names. Laura Bennett Langford sounded like a law firm, so everyone just called us Laura and Victor. The way you talk about thunder and lightning, like we had always existed together. The foundation now had 187 centers in 41 countries. We had spent or committed every penny of Victor's original fortune and another $8 billion in donations that kept pouring in. The wig trees were in every lobby, heavy with thousands of donated wigs swaying like prayer flags. Cancer drug prices in the United States had fallen 68% in 18 months. Childhood leukemia survival was at 96%. No child in America had died waiting for a transplant in 413 days. And tonight, for the first time in recorded history, 0 patients were discharged to the street from any hospital in the city of Chicago because they couldn't pay. We had quietly bought every outstanding medical debt in Cook County and forgiven it at midnight. The garden was full of people who had once been strangers. Marisol and her husband danced barefoot in the snow, their youngest daughter asleep on a blanket of coats. Jamal, now 15 and 6 inches taller, DJ'd from a laptop, grinning every time someone requested his song, the one that played when his new bone marrow took. Anthony, 8 years old and cancer-free, ran between legs with a sparkler, shouting, "Miss Laura, look, I'm magic!" Emily, 7 months pregnant and glowing, sat on a bench with Daniel, her hand on her belly, laughing at something Victor was saying. I stood at the edge of the roof, city lights glittering below us like spilled diamonds, and felt the ring on my finger catch the moonlight. Victor came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, rested his chin on my shoulder. "Happy?" he asked, voice low. I turned in his arms. "I used to think Happy was a quiet house and a man who came home at 6, I said. "Turns out Happy is louder than I expected." He laughed, the sound I loved most in the world now. Someone started counting down from 10, 9, 8, 7, at 3. Victor reached into his coat and pulled out the very first pair of my brown leather boots, the ones I'd given him that Christmas night 2 years ago. He had kept them polished and perfect. 2, 1. He knelt in the snow, just like he had the night he proposed, and gently slipped them onto my bare feet. "Still fit," he whispered. The sky exploded. Not fireworks, boots, thousands of them, released from nets above the garden, filled the air like a blizzard in reverse. Every pair we had collected from every center around the world, launched at once by children pulling ropes. Brown leather, black leather, red patent, tiny toddler sizes, work boots, combat boots, cowboy boots, all of them soaring upward, catching the city lights, spinning slowly toward the stars. People screamed and laughed and cried all at once. Anthony ran to me, threw his arms around my legs. "Did you see, Miss Laura? The boots are flying." I picked him up, held him tight. "They're going home," I told him. Every single one. And they were. Some would land on rooftops in Chicago. Some would drift across Lake Michigan. Some would be found months later in Indiana cornfields, in Michigan orchards, on the shores of Canada. People would pick them up, read the silver tags engraved with messages from strangers who had once been dying, and now were not, and they would understand something wordless and huge. Kindness travels farther than we think. Victor took my hand. Below us the city cheered. Phones were out, live streams everywhere. Boots for Laura trended worldwide within minutes. At 12:07 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from the Foundation's global tracker. The first boot had already been found, on the roof of a pediatric hospital in Lagos, Nigeria. A nurse posted a photo, the boot upside down in the rain gutter, silver tag glinting. Message on the tag, from Laura in Chicago. "To whoever finds this, you are not alone. Keep walking." Within an hour, reports were coming in from London, Cape Town, São Paulo, Mumbai, Sydney. By dawn, boots had been found on every continent except Antarctica, We fixed that 3 weeks later with a very confused research team. The world had officially been walked around by a pair of size 8 brown leather boots that once cost $19.99 at Target. January 1st, 2027, the Bennett Amendment went into effect. No American would ever again pay more than $2,000 out of pocket for health care in a year. Insurance companies tried one last lawsuit. The Supreme Court refused to hear it 9-0. That same day, Victor and I stood in the garden again, now quiet and empty except for the original pair of boots, hanging from a single wire in the center, turning slowly in the wind. I was pregnant, 43 years old was not the plan, but the universe apparently still had jokes left. Victor had cried when the test turned positive, big, undignified sobs in the bathroom of the penthouse. Then he'd spent 3 hours on the phone with the best maternal fetal medicine team in the world, just to be sure. We hadn't told anyone yet. Emily was going to lose her mind. I rested my hand on the tiny curve that was barely there. What should we name her? Victor asked. I looked up at the boots swaying above us. Hope, I said. Or Mercy, maybe both. He kissed my forehead. Hope Mercy Bennett Langford, he said, testing it. Poor kid's going to need a big personality. I laughed until I couldn't breathe. Later, when the city was asleep and the garden lights dimmed to starlight only, I took off the boots Victor had put on my feet at midnight. I hung them next to their twins, the original pair. 4 boots now, 2 stories that had become one. I left a new silver tag on the left one. It read, "To the woman in the parking garage who hasn't given away her wig yet. Do it. The boots are coming. I promise." I signed it the way I sign everything now. Just my name, because the world already knows who I am. Laura, the woman who gave away everything she had left, and somehow ended up with the entire world in return. And every year on Christmas Eve, no matter where I am, whether it's Lagos or Reykjavik or a village in the Andes where a child has just received her first pair of shoes, I look up at the sky. And somewhere, always, I see a single brown boot drifting across the stars. Still walking, still carrying the message I learned the hardest way possible. When you give away the last thing you have, the universe finally has room to give you everything. And it always, always starts with a stranger who just needed to know they were worth saving. So if you're reading this, and you're cold, and you're scared, and you think no one is coming, look up. The boots are on their way, and they never ever walk alone. Until next time, goodbye.